Hello and welcome everyone to the first ever episode of Chalk Talk Nation, where we will be previewing the NL East this week. This is exciting time because now we will have baseball activities. It was Super Bowl weekend last weekend, and guys are reporting to spring training in Florida and Arizona. I'm Rob Rundle. Joining with me is Noah Gayhart. We've been friends for a couple years now. Noah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Good to be here. So we're going to talk a little bit about our background with baseball, where we started, where we played, maybe a story or two, our favorite teams and players, and then we're going to break down every single team in the National League East. So, Noah, I know you went to Ryle High School. That's a high school in the Northern Kentucky area, Region 9 to be exact. I went to Beechwood, another Region 9 school. Talk to me a little bit about your baseball experience.
Yeah. So I played second base pretty much my entire life. Went to Rao High School, played junior, senior year on the varsity team. My junior year, we were actually number 2 in the state at one point. Senior year, let's not talk about rankings, but it was good. It was a lot of fun. I miss playing. That's why I'm still trying to stay involved with baseball at least a little bit here, talking on the podcast. So
Yeah, for sure. How many home runs did you hit in high school?
I hit two for the actual like for high school, and then I hit one outside of it in just like a fall ball league. So I guess three total for the career. It's not too bad,
Nice, nice. So short and sweet, short and sweet. Well, for
right?
me, I played baseball at Beechwood High School, as I mentioned, and won the All A State Championship, which is 1A to 3A. So it's kind of nice in the state of Kentucky. They divide state championships up because they give the smaller schools a chance. But so we won 1A to 3A in my senior year. We did not make it out of the ninth region. We got run rolled by Highlands in the actual region, which is 1A to 6A. But high school was a lot of fun. I played 4 years of collegiate baseball at the University of Pikeville. I know I have some friends listening in from that area, so much thanks to all. And I just kind of want to transition a little bit, Noah. What are some of your favorite teams, or if you have just one favorite team and then some players?
Yeah, sure. So my favorite team, I'm kind of a homer, with the Cincinnati Reds.
Yeah,
Growing up, I know a guy I played second base, so a guy that I looked up to a lot was Brandon Phillips. With the obviously the
that dude
flashiness is kind of
BP.
what they
Yeah,
right. That's what draws you in, but I don't know, just like I mean, it's just fun to watch, good player to watch. Another guy, like especially at the plate, I loved to watch was Joey Votto. Just his whole approach and the way that he works, and just kind of, I mean, he's the
yeah.
OBP king, and so like that's always what I tried to do when I was playing, because I mean, I hit 3 home runs, but those all came senior year, so that was definitely not my game. So
Right,
just any
right,
way I
right.
could get on base. Those were the guys I kind of looked up to. How about yourself?
Well, my favorite team, and I think a lot of people who are tuning in live for this podcast, the Oakland Athletics are my favorite team. And a lot of people ask me why, and it's kind of a funny story actually. It all started with Josh Reddick. I'm a huge Josh Reddick fan, so that's one of my favorite players. But going back to the Oakland A's, I've always liked their color scheme. It's just different. It's not your typical green, or sorry, it is. It's not your typical blue. It's not your typical red. Your basic team colors, right?
Mhm.
So, um, and then also they would have different players every year. And since I have such a short attention span, it's like really nice to see that and see new players. And I really like Coco Crisp too. But some other favorite players of mine, I really like Trevor Bauer. I really like what he's doing with the game of baseball, trying to grow it with media, right? That's something that
Right.
I could talk about for hours, it almost seems like, because we really have to target the younger generation to watch a 3 hour baseball game or to go to the ballpark. So I'm a strong advocate with Trevor Bauer when it comes to baseball. Other favorite players, I definitely like Crush Davis. He didn't have that great of a year. He didn't hit 247
Yeah.
actually, which I thought was kind of,
That's a shame,
it is a
honestly.
shame. But I don't know. I've always liked him. I like Matt Chapman. I like all the A's players. But yeah, so I'd probably say my favorite player though right now is Trevor Bauer for sure.
Yeah,
But
I mean that's definitely an interesting thing that I guess I've never really thought about. Is if with you growing up an A's fan, especially because that would have been the majority right after the Moneyball whole thing kind of took off. Like you're
yeah,
definitely getting all kinds of guys that you've probably not heard of for the most part that just show up and it's like, oh, this guy's
yeah.
now hitting like 270 with like a 380 on base percentage just out of nowhere, and you've never heard of the guy. So I would imagine that's probably pretty cool.
Yeah, it really is. It's kind of funny because that movie came out a couple years after I started to follow the Athletics. and I was like, oh wow, yeah, this is definitely my favorite baseball movie, 100%.
Right.
But so kind of moving on though, that was kind of nice just to get a little briefing about us. So we're going to talk a little bit about what this podcast is about. Obviously, it's going to be about baseball. There'll be personal stories in there, but mostly it's going to be Major League Baseball. Um, as you can see on the screen too, we have our Twitter handle, so go ahead and follow us. You can also follow us at chalktalknation. Our website is launching February 11th, which is in 2 days, and we will have blogs, vlogs, and we will post other content. Our podcast will be live on all platforms: Apple Music, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And but yeah, so that's just the information, just kind of the basic of what our podcast is about. We record every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern time because that's a good time for everyone in the evening, trying to get ready for the work week and everything like that. But we do have some breaking news though to talk about before we dive into the National League East, and that is Mookie Betts. You want to go ahead with this one, Noah?
Yeah, so the deal just got announced, I would say probably about 15 minutes ago now. It's pretty similar to the deal that's kind of been floating around here for a couple days. So the new deal, the way it's going to work out is that the Dodgers are going to be acquiring Mookie Betts, David Price, and Brusdar Graterol, the guy that was originally going to the Red Sox. The Red Sox are going to get Jeter Downs, Alex Verdugo, and possibly another prospect. It's not completely done and official yet. And then for the Twins, they're going to get Kenta Maeda and some cash. The other thing that's probably worth noting is that the Dodgers are going to get a heck of a lot of cash out of this.
Yeah.
The Red Sox are they're gonna be paying half of David Price's salary, so the Dodgers are only going to be paying him 16 million a year, which is a heck of a lot better than the 32 million a year he'd be making on the books otherwise.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really good too for the Dodgers because they got rid of Homer Bailey and they dumped his contract onto the Royals, and now he was on the Athletics, and now it's ironic enough he's with the Twins as I think the number three pitcher. Could be number four now with Kenta Maeda going to Minnesota. But I really like this trade because we did mention that we didn't really know what the other piece was going to be with Verdugo going back to Boston. It was going to be cash originally, but I really, really, really like this Jeter Downs guy. Drafted by the Reds in 2017, he's a first round draft pick. This guy had a monster season last year. He hit 276, but he had an 888 OPS, which is almost MVP status. I know it's
Mhm.
only the minor leagues, but this guy can do it all. I mean, he's 21 years old, and he could be a nice battery there at shortstop and second base with Xander Bogaerts in the future.
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy that really he kind of came out of I don't want to say he came out of nowhere because I think he was either a compository round pick or like a second round pick for the Reds a couple
Yeah.
years ago. But I mean, he was a guy that was slotted in at like the back of their top 10, maybe even like into the teens. And I mean, he just came out and absolutely crushed the ball all season long. I mean, you mentioned it with the high 800s OPS, and I mean, he launched himself into the top 100 prospects. So
Yeah.
yeah, so good for the Red Sox. It's kind of one of those things where, as a Reds fan looking back, it's kind of like, dang, it sucks to let that guy get away, especially with what ended up happening out of that Dodgers deal. But you win some,
Hmm.
you lose some. That's just kind of baseball. How do you feel about this for the Red Sox, other than Jeter Downs and just giving up a Mookie Betts in general? How do you feel about that?
I think it's a lot to give up. We do know that Mookie Betts wanted a lot of money and he wanted 12 years. I think it was 12 years, 430 mil. Like those are near Mike Trout numbers right there. I mean, Mookie Betts, yes, he won MVP in 2018, but like one just out of the blue, like tremendous season. Like yes, he's a very good player, but asking that much money, you could either just do 10 years, just bump up the AAV, his annual average value, but I think it was smart to get him out of Boston because you still get a very young prospect. Alex Verdugo is 23 years old. He's going to produce not probably the same numbers Mookie Betts per se. He'll probably be about 20 points down on batting average. But I mean, that's a guy who can play right field, center field, left field, and I know they just extended Benintendi as well for 3 years. So their outfield is pretty solidified, and you get an absolute stud prospect out of it, Jeter Downs. So it's probably a win for both sides, honestly.
See, I don't know if I agree. One because I just think anytime you have a Mookie Betts, I don't think you should get rid of a Mookie Betts. I
Yeah.
mean, the goal in baseball and the reason that people trade for these prospects like Jeter Downs and stuff like that, and the
Hmm.
draft, the goal is to develop a guy that's going to be Mookie Betts. Like
Yeah.
that's the goal. Mookie Betts is probably, I mean, arguably, but not really all that much so, the second best player in baseball. Like that's what you hope you're going to get out of your prospects, and then
Oh, for sure.
I mean, just to give that up, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't rub me the right way.
Mm-hmm.
especially just because like the reason that they've said that they're doing this is because they want to offload cash. But I mean, the Red Sox themselves are worth around 3 billion.
Yeah, seriously.
The owner group that owns the Red Sox is worth I think a little over 7 billion because they also own at least a majority stake in Liverpool FC, the big soccer team over in Europe.
Yeah,
So it's not like they don't have the cash to pay Mookie Betts what he's worth. So from that standpoint, it's kind of I don't agree with it.
yeah,
I do think the one way that this works out, and maybe this is their plan, is that if they go after him this offseason. Because I mean, they've never said
yeah.
that they wouldn't do something like that, but because I mean, they can offer him whatever they want to this offseason, but then if they get him back, then they've also just gotten Jeter Downs and Alex Verdugo on a 1 year rental. So I don't
Exactly.
know. I think if they did it that way, I think it's a great trade for them. If they're not going to go back out after Mookie Betts, I don't like this trade.
See, I like what you said there by going after him in free agency. That's exactly what they could do. Maybe they had a mutual agreement to trade him for that reason, though. They could still have Verdugo. That would be an
Well,
absolute
I would hope not, because that's
crazy
definitely
outfield.
tampering, and that's going to be even further down their cheating scandal. So I would hope that they didn't
Yeah,
come to some sort of agreement. But I mean, that's definitely a good strategy. How
yeah.
do you feel about Maeda going to the Twins?
I like Maeda going to the Twins a lot. I definitely think he's going to help them out in the AL Central. It's a pretty weak division and whatnot. Also, by the way, we do have a live chat feed going on YouTube right now. So, hi Lauren, hi Natalie, and hi Angela, my sister. Welcome to the stream. One of my buddies mentioned too. He texted me saying we should go on Periscope on Twitter. That way people can comment in live, and that's a really good idea. We'll try to do that next week. But no, I really think Maeda to the Twins. It's going to be really good. It's going to play well for both parties. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you look at where they are. The Twins are definitely in a position where they're definitely going to be competing for the AL Central this year. I mean, it's already kind of a weak division. The Indians, for whatever reason, are trying not to win somehow. I mean, the White Sox are on the come up, but then you've got like the Tigers and the Royals who are just pretty much out of it from opening day.
Yeah.
I think Maeda gives them an experienced, good starter. And even if they run into troubles in the bullpen, like he could just go back to what he's doing for the Dodgers, where he was just coming out and throwing a couple innings out of the pen for the Dodgers. They could just do that for the Twins as well if some of their other guys really pick it up in the rotation.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's going to be interesting to see. You know, Jose Barrios is going to be the ace for the Twins, but you look at the rest of their pitching staff. It's a bunch of mediocre pitchers. You know, they were big names back in the
Right.
day, but now if it is a pitcher's ballpark, so they could. I mean, they just need to work on their command and everything. But good. It's going to be good for the Twins. I think they're still going to come out on top in the AL Central, but we'll talk about that division here in a couple of weeks. Let's go ahead and move on to surprising free agents remaining. Number one on our list is Yasiel Puig. What do you think about him not signing yet?
Well, I do want to say I love Puig as a player. Uh,
Yeah,
as a
Puig.
Reds guy, I loved having him here for half a
Yes.
year. You know, I don't know exactly why he hasn't signed. I would guess. I know the reports came out like a long, long time ago, like back towards the beginning of the offseason, that he was looking for similar money to what Marcelo Zuna and Nick
Yeah.
Castellanos were looking for.
Yeah.
I'd say if he's still asking for something like that, then it doesn't surprise me he's not signed because he's not worth what they are worth.
Not right now,
Uh,
at least.
right. I mean, I would hope someone takes a flyer on him. I know that recently he had interest in, or the Giants had interest in him, but then they just went out and they just added Hunter Pence. And
Yeah.
then the other team that was linked to him was the Rays, and they just traded yesterday. They traded Emilio Pagan for Manuel Margot. So it's kind of
That's an
like,
absolute blockbuster trade, by the way.
yeah, and we can talk about that in a minute if you want
Yeah.
to. But it's just
Yeah.
that, I mean, what do you do for Puig there? You're just running out of options. I mean, I think the two teams that
Yeah.
make the most sense are the Marlins, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, and the Pittsburgh Pirates. And he's had his problems with Don Mattingly in the past. So
And the
Miami
Pirates.
doesn't look good, and he's had a lot of problems with the Pirates. So I don't think
Hmm.
that makes a whole lot of sense either. So I mean, it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. I mean, he's the top projected free agent still out there,
Yeah.
highest projected F4. I think it's like 1.8 somewhere around that area, which is definitely the highest. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think if someone gets him on a short deal or just something that's pretty cheap, I think that they're going to get a steal of a player.
Oh, they're definitely going to get a steal of a player as well. I'm going to bring it over to the stats real quick and just kind of show everyone what we mean. This is Yasiel Puig right here. You take a look at his stats just with Cleveland alone. He had 297 in 49 games. We know he struggled a little bit with the Reds, but he still managed to hit 252. And that OPS is what's really, really nice to see. 800. and that's just over average right there. But Puig still has a good arm, and it's going to be interesting to see, like you said, what team he is going to go to, because there's a lot of mediocre teams out there that could use some depth in the outfield, especially now that you can have 26 players on the active roster, which is huge. And that's
Right.
you mentioned Hunter Pence, and also Billy Hamilton. He's going to get a chance with the Giants as well, and he'll probably make the squad because you got to have him as a defensive replacement later in the game.
Right. I mean,
But
he's what the 26 man thing. Billy Hamilton is what I'm
yeah,
talking about, but he's definitely built for the 26 man role. I mean, defense, late game substitution, coming off the bench, pinch running, and a key situation. I mean, that's gonna be a huge addition for them, especially because the pitchers are capped at 13, so you really can't really use that extra spot for a pitcher. So
yeah,
at that point, you might as well try and get some sort of game change for your team. Definitely wouldn't play him at all, though. I think he rated the lowest. If you
yeah,
look at Baseball Savant, I think he rated like in the lowest possible percentile for exit velocity on his hits last year.
yeah,
So, I mean, it's definitely not a guy I would stick in the lineup, but late game is a good option.
yeah, for sure. And it'd be interesting to see too if Major League Baseball, not this year, but in the next couple of years, if they implement a 26 man award for the year, and like that'd be really cool to see. Kind of like
Yeah,
they
that
do
wouldn't
six
be a
man a
bad
year.
idea, honestly.
Yeah,
But
and that's something we're going to
I
talk
don't know.
about in the last week. So much to talk about. So much to talk about. Moving on to our next free agent. I know a lot of people have issues with this guy. I love this guy to death, Scooter Jeanette. What do you think?
I I think Scooter Jeanette may make sense for the right team in the right situation on a minor league deal with an invite to spring training, and I think that's about it. I think you could probably. I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but we've got two other names that are kind of in the same boat in Jason Kipnis and Brian Dozier.
And Brock
That
Holt in a way
no,
too.
I want to talk about him separately. I don't think it's the same group, but with
Oh my bad.
Jeanette
I
Mate
thought you meant
or
second baseman.
Jeanette,
That's my bad. No,
no,
you're
no, no, no,
absolutely right.
no.
Yeah, absolutely
Jeanette
right.
Dozier, Kipnis, they're all guys that can swing it a little bit, but they don't really do a whole lot else. I know Scooter Jeanette specifically. I know that when he was with the Reds, we tried running him out in the outfield a little bit and other stuff, and he could do that earlier in his career. But since he's
Mm-hmm.
had the shoulder issues, he's kind of limited to second base. And in a game that's kind of evolving in a way where you want the most versatile players possible, he doesn't really fit that mold. You kind of say
Yeah.
the same thing about Brian Dozier. I would think he might make a little bit more sense for a team just because he brings a bit more pop in his bat. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a whether you want average or you want pop. That's kind of be the difference if you're going to go after Jeanette or Dozier. Kipnis, you just kind of got to hope for a bounce back. He's a guy
Yeah.
that I mean he can play. He can play a couple more positions, I would say, than Jeanette or Dozier. But I mean, then you're kind of giving up a little bit in the bat department. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of any of the three players myself, but I could see where they make sense for the right team on a minor league deal, and just if they make the team out of camp, then so be it.
Yeah. If you look over here at Jason Kipnis' stats, I mean, he played 121 games this year dealing with injuries, 147, and then 2017 90, and he's just been a very, very average or below average kind of player, hitting 245, 230, 232. That is one thing Scooter Jeanette has done better. Is you look at Scooter Jeanette in 2018, he hit 310, 2017, 295. Granted, yes, that's 2 to 3 years ago, and now it's kind of a small sample size with only 64, 69 at bats in 2019, 21 games for the Reds and the Giants. But Scooter Jeanette should definitely get a minor league contract, and
Yeah, I mean,
definitely,
he'll sign somewhere, and
yeah,
especially like, and I would imagine that he'll sign somewhere that he's got definitely a chance to play, especially with the 26 man rosters. I think what would probably be best served would be for a team like the Orioles or the Royals or the Tigers to go out and get a guy like him. Hope he can put it together, give him some at bats, and then maybe an injury happens down the line, and you can flip him at the deadline.
yeah, exactly. It could be it's a low risk, high reward situation
Yeah,
with any of those three guys if you really think about it. Our next guy we want to talk about is Cameron Maben. Talk about a guy at 32 years old just revamping his career. He played in 82 games with the Yankees, hit 285 with an 858 OPS. This is a guy who could still get picked up by a major league ball club.
yeah. I mean, he definitely came out of nowhere with the Yankees this year. That's for sure,
Yeah,
and they really needed it with all the injuries that they had. So
crazy, and they
I
still
mean, it
won
was good
100
for them that it
games.
showed up.
It's insane.
Yeah, the Yankees are pretty insane, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that he's probably a guy that teams are probably if they're talking, they're probably talking to Puig first because
Hmm.
between those two, that's probably the guy I'd rather have. But
Yeah,
I would say maybe if Puig goes off the board, then suddenly the interest in Cameron Maybin's probably going to take a big uptick.
yeah, for sure. I completely agree. Our next free agent is Colin McHugh. Colin McHugh coming off a pretty decent season, if you ask me. I mean, it's not ERA isn't there where you want it to be, but what I look for a pitcher is a WHIP, and for those who don't know what WHIP is, walking hits per innings pitched. Major league average is about 1.3, and he had a 1.23 last year, so just over one walk or hit per inning pitched, and he pitched in 74 and two-thirds innings. So, I mean, relievers are really hard to come by. This is a guy who used to start back in 2015, 2016. It's going to be interesting to see where he signs and what kind of role he's going to get in the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a guy. Like he'll probably, if I had to guess, I'd say he's a guy that's probably going to catch on with a team that'll be contending for the playoffs. He'll come into
Mm-hmm.
spring training, try and earn a spot in their bullpen. I don't know. I like him because he's a guy who started in the past. So if it comes to it, he can do that. Experience out of the bullpen. He's worked with the Astros, and for as much as everyone's hated on the Astros this offseason, as far as their handling of pitchers has gone and kind of revamping people's careers, they've kind of been the team that everyone else has envied. And so after spending some time there, there could be stuff that he's can take from Houston and take to his new ball club. I know that that's kind of what Charlie Morton did when he left and went to the Rays a few years ago now.
Yeah.
So I think he'd be a good pickup for somebody. But I mean, we'll just have to see what happens to him.
Hopefully, we don't see a Craig Kimbrell situation where he decides to come in the middle of the stages of the year and just gets absolutely shelled. Because I think Kimbrell had like a 6 ERA or maybe even higher with the Cubs, and he signed a big contract, and it was a big mess. Hopefully, we don't get that with
Yeah, I
McHugh.
mean, I don't think that'll be the same situation, mostly because I mean, Kimbrel was a bit more worth the money than what Colin McHugh would be. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, Kimbrel didn't show that he was worth the money this season because I mean, he just got blasted every time he went out. But I mean, I think that he'll probably catch on somewhere, even if it's just in the minor leagues to start the year, and he'll just get called up at some point. I would imagine
hmm
he'll definitely be in on somebody's roster.
yeah, definitely. And there's quite some teams in the NL East that could use another reliever as
Yeah.
well, and we'll definitely talk about that. But our last free agent, the guy you wanted to wait to talk about, Brock Holt. Tell me about Brock
Yeah,
Holt.
I think this is definitely the most valuable guy remaining. Brock Holt, one-time All-Star a few years ago, where they finally rewarded him for what he does, and he's just the Swiss Army knife of baseball players.
Yeah,
Not going to blow you away in terms of any of his production, but I mean he plays every position except for catcher, and honestly, I think if you asked him to do it, he'd probably play catcher too. But I mean, he can hit a little bit. It's not going to blow you away. Not much pop to his bat, but I mean, especially with the 26-man rosters this year, I think this is the guy to get. I'm honestly surprised he's still available because he just seems like such a
yeah.
valuable guy to have. But I know that there was some interest from the Reds at one point that it got announced. I haven't really heard anything in like the last month, so I'm not exactly sure what the holdup on that market is. But I would that's a guy that I would expect to see off the board soon.
Yeah, this is a guy that reminds me just like Jeff McNeil in the NL East
Yeah.
with the Mets. Literally the exact same. Very a platoon guy, can play anywhere, and he doesn't hit for power, but the dude gets on base. And last year he played 11 games at first, 20 games at second, 6 at short, 4 at third, 9 in the outfield, and then 1 game as a DH. I mean, Brock Holt is an absolute steal. I'm surprised he hasn't signed yet. He had a 771 OPS, but really, it's kind of misleading because 750 is average for
Right.
Major League
Roughly.
Baseball.
Yeah.
771, you're like, well, what are you talking about? Well, like we said, this guy doesn't hit for power. You combine slugging percentage and on base percentage. That's how you get OPS. And so this guy had an absolutely stellar OBP, 369, and he hit 297. Like, this is a guy who needs to get picked up, and he is going to be a huge impact for someone. Definitely.
Yeah. For sure. Well, I think that's
Definitely.
all the free agents we have. You want to start getting into the NL East a little bit?
Yeah, it's about that time. It is about that time. So we're gonna go over key off season signees for the Braves. We're gonna start off with the Atlanta Braves. Marcel Ozuna, the big one. 1 year, $18 million. Last year, he had a 800 OPS, 29 bombs, 328 OBP, and this is just a guy that has been on a lot of teams' radars, but the Braves came out on top.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not as high on Marcelo Zuna as a lot of other guys. I know that I followed this his signing a bit more closely than others just because he was tied to the Reds a lot.
Yeah,
And in fact, it actually got reported he turned down 3 years, $50 million from the Reds to take this 1 year deal with the Braves. So he's really kind of betting on himself this year, hoping he's going to produce and then get a better contract next offseason. I mean, I like this for the Braves. I think it makes sense. Definitely gives them some more pop in their outfield with Ronald Acuna. I mean, I know that he's probably not going to kill you on defense, but I mean, he's definitely a far ways away from what he used to be when he
yeah,
won the Gold Glove a few years ago. But oh, I mean, I like the signing. It's going to be a boost to the lineup, especially after losing Donaldson.
yeah. Especially after losing Donaldson, and you're right. You know, this is a pillow contract for him. Allows him to kind of reproduce. He only hit 241 last year, which was actually his lowest by 20 points in his career. So he's a good player. He'll have to stay healthy, and if he wants to get a contract, we saw it with Goldschmidt last year. I mean, that's a no doubt he's going to get extended with the Cardinals, but
Right.
you never know with Azuna. You might get an extension, or he could get traded. You could flip him. There's a lot of good things that the Braves have going for them right now. Another guy that they signed, Will Smith, 3 years, $39 million with a 2023 club option for 13 mil. This is just a guy who will get it done, especially with guys like Shane Green, who has not performed at all when he was traded to the Braves, and this is a guy they need late in the late stages of a ball game.
Yeah. I mean, Will Smith, I think, is definitely going to be a lockdown guy for them. I mean, 65 innings last year to 276 ERA and 96 punch outs in 65 innings is definitely a good rate. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think that he's definitely going to be a solidifier for their bullpen. That was definitely a problem for them down the stretch, which is why they went out and they got Shane Green. They got Mark Melanson at the deadline. Um, they kind of struggled a little bit last year. Melanson and Shane Green did once they came over, but I mean, I think that we're going to see probably this year. I think that they're going to have a pretty solid bullpen at least through those front three. I mean, you got guys like Lou Jackson and Darren O'Day, maybe Chris Martin as well. So I don't know. I mean, there's got a chance. There's a potential there to be a good bullpen. It's just kind of going to depend on which version of those players show up.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if Shane Green does show up because, like we said before, he had a 4 ERA, just over a 4 ERA when he was traded to Atlanta midseason.
Mm-hmm.
When he was with the Tigers, he had like a 1.4 ERA, and his WHIP was
Yeah, I
way
mean,
below one. And he just change of scenery can either be really good for certain players, it can also be really bad. Now, I really just want to ask you this though, because I was just absolutely shocked with this contract. I just can't believe it. I know it's a big name and everything like that. This is a guy who's way in his late stages of his career. Cole Hamels, 36 years old, did not have a very good year last year, in my opinion. Only started 27 games, um, especially for $18 million for a year contract. A year contract. Like, what are your thoughts on this?
his year wasn't horrible. I mean, a 3.81 ERA, that's probably below league average for this last season, especially with the way the ball was and the ball flying out of the yard. 143 punchouts in 141 and two-thirds innings. So that's about a strikeout an inning. WHIP was maybe a little high at a 1.39, but I don't know. I mean, is it a bit of an overpay? Probably, but I think at this point you probably know what you're going to get out of Cole Hamels. I mean, part of it too is just what the pitching market did this year. I mean, Mad Bum got a big deal. I mean, you look at
Yeah,
Garrett Cole, got all kinds of money. Zach Wheeler, who we'll probably talk about here in a little bit, also got a lot of money.
yeah,
So I think that those guys were probably pushing the ceiling up a little bit. And so I think Cole Hamels probably reaped the benefits of that to some extent. I don't know. I mean, I like the signing because they've got a really, for the most part, young rotation. I mean, Mike Soroka, Max Fried, maybe you see some Kyle Wright this year, Sean Newcomb, Tuki Desant. Those are all guys that are, in the early stages of their career, and so I think that Cole Hamels gives them some stability and it gives them some veteran presence in the clubhouse.
yeah. I can see where you're coming from, just kind of being the veteran and helping them out and whatnot. But I've never really been sold on Cole Hamels since about 2014 when he was with the Rangers, and then on. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. He has done better in the National League than he has in the American League, but
Mm.
it'll be
Yeah, I
interesting to
mean
see.
it's a risky move at 18 million, but if you
Definitely.
got the money to spend, I mean, if you're just willing to spend the money, so might as well.
Yeah, if you have the money to spend, that's no issue. It's just I just can't see myself giving 18 mil a year for a 36-year-old left-handed pitcher who throws 90. So that's just my opinion. I don't know. Moving on though, so let's go ahead and look at the potential lineup for the Atlanta Braves. So we got Travis d'Arnaud catching, Freddie Freeman at first base, Ozzy Albies at second, Johan Camargo. You could also slide in Austin Riley in there, the young prospect. Dansby Swanson at short, Ronald Acuna Jr. in the outfield with Marcell Ozuna and Ender Inciarte. You want to talk about a very, very solidified lineup. That's definitely the Atlanta Braves right here.
Oh yeah, for sure. One of the guys we didn't mention when we were talking about the new additions was Travis d'Arnaud, and
Yeah.
I think given the way that that catching seems to be for the most part in this league, where it's more what you can do behind the plate, framing and throwing guys out and stuff like that, not about the hitting. Travis d'Arnaud is a guy that does it on both sides of the ball. He kind of struggled a little bit early in the season, but he got traded to the Rays, and in the 92 games he hit with them, 16 home runs, 67 RBIs, OPS around 800. I mean, out of a catcher, that's definitely the production you like to see. I think platooning him and Tyler Flowers behind the plate is going to be huge for them. Uh, Johan Camargo and Austin Riley at third base. It's probably going to be a bit of a duking it out to see who wins that position. I know Riley played some outfield last year, so they could probably mix him in there too as well. But for a lineup that lost 900 OPS player in Josh Donaldson last year, they seem to be handling it pretty well.
Very, very well. And Johan Camargo, before Donaldson even got there, he had a very good season. And like you said, Austin Riley, he could play, he could dabble out there in the outfield if need be. And what's really big for me is that catching position. When you have Tyler Flowers, who really bounced back in his career, you have got to feel good as the Braves manager just to be like, okay, I can put you in here for maybe 5 6 innings, and then I
Mhm.
need a late switch up, double switch even. Okay, here comes Tyler Flowers, and you don't lose anything in your lineup. This is one of the strongest lineups 1 through 9 that you could possibly see in the National League East.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
and they're definitely gonna be towards the top in their division, no doubt. And we'll get to that later on here in the podcast. Moving on now, the Miami Marlins. So we have a
Well,
lot.
real quick, I'm gonna interrupt. One last guy I want to mention.
Go for it. Go for it.
Minor league signing for the Braves that we kind of glanced over at first, but King Felix. I mean,
Felix. Ah,
talk
yeah. How could we even
talk about a legend,
forget about that? Sorry about that. Yeah. I mean, yeah. King Felix. That was big powerhouse name. It was funny because Seattle gave him like a final curtain call, like he was going to retire and whatnot. But King Felix, he's 33 years old. He's still got stuff left in the tank. I just think he needs a change of scenery. I think with him, he needs to understand that he doesn't have that overpowering fastball or that wipeout
Mm.
slider that he used to have. He's really got to pound in on his command and being able to work all quadrants of the zone. If he does that, that's definitely an absolute steal for the Braves. Like we talked about with Hamels, right? I mean, if you have the money to spend, go ahead. But with Felix, you got him on a minor league contract. Like
Right.
I'd just be shocked if he wasn't part of the rotation, or even in the bullpen. I mean, why not? Just dabble him there. You just never know. It'll be interesting to
Yeah.
see how it plays out here in the spring. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's $1 million if he makes the team. A definitely low risk, possibly high reward thing.
yeah,
I think a lot of the reason that King Felix has struggled recently is just the injuries. I mean, he really caught the injury bug here the last 3 or 4 seasons, and then when he's been out there, it's just and part of that is it's just going to take some adjustments on the way that he pitches. I think being in a new place that gives him the opportunity where he's not in the Mariners franchise where they all are like King Felix has been this guy for so long, and there's all this pressure on him to be the ace. Coming to a new team like the Braves, they've got guys already. They've got the Mike Soroka, they've got the Cole Hamels, they've got Max Fried. They don't need him to come in and be the guy. And so I
yeah.
think that gives him an opportunity to come into spring training, maybe tweak his stuff, kind of reinvent himself as a pitcher, as maybe a guy that's more of a command than an overpower guy. And
Exactly.
I think
Yeah.
he's got a shot where he could catch on at the end of the rotation. And if not, I think his stuff probably plays up in the bullpen where you're just throwing maybe 20 pitches a night instead of going out and trying to throw 6 innings.
Yeah, and hypothetically speaking, if he doesn't for some reason make the Braves, there's going to be a major league ball club that's going to take a chance on him. It's going to happen. He's 33 years old, big name. Like he could bring tickets to the ballpark too, because some people, even in the National League, they haven't really got a chance to see King Felix pitch. I mean, it'll just be cool to see how this plays out for him in
Yeah,
2020.
definitely for sure.
definitely. But yeah, let's go ahead and now move on to the Marlins. As you can see, I'm sporting the Miami Marlins hat. First of all, I just want to say I really like. A lot of people don't like their logo, like in their new colors, even though they rebranded after 6 years. But it's the Miami Vice colors. You know, it's the Miami. You got the teal, the pink. I think it looks really sharp. But uh, big signing right here. Huge. Jonathan VR. He was acquired via
Yeah,
trade for left-handed pitcher Easton Lucas in 2019. Hit 274 with a 339 OBP and 453 slugging percentage. That's almost an 800 OPS, and this dude is just filthy on the diamond.
yeah. I will say about the uniforms, I just have one gripe. Have you? Their spring training uniforms are these nice like blue, like the color of your hat, and that's the actual
Like the
color of the
teal.
uniform.
Yeah.
And they don't wear them a single time in the regular season. So that's
Yeah.
my one gripe. I honestly, maybe if they wore the uniforms, they'd play a little better. I mean, who knows? You know, look good, play good. You know, isn't that what they say?
Or play a little bit
Uh,
better.
Right. Yeah. But you know, I cannot believe they got VR for just Easton Lucas. I mean,
That's
it's a next to nothing thing
insane.
to give up for a guy. I mean, like you said, almost 800 OPS last year, 24 home runs, 40 stolen bases, a guy that could play the entire infield. I mean, this is definitely a steal for them. I don't know. I mean, this is good. I don't know if this is going to be a guy they're going to look to hold on to long term, which I mean they definitely could. Or this is a guy that maybe they move at the deadline. You know, it maybe not this year, but maybe the next year. Who knows? You know, they're just. It's definitely a good get for them, and it would have been for any team, honestly.
Yeah, and we all know that they're not going to be able to surpass the Philadelphia Phillies, the Atlanta Braves of that division. You know, like I mean, it's
Hmm.
just it's inevitable. But this is a win-win situation for them because they're gonna draw people to the ballpark in a town that's not necessarily baseball friendly, you could say.
Hmm.
And Jonathan VR, like you said, he's just one of those players, man, that he can just get the job done, and they could flip him and get more prospects. The Miami Marlins are in the top five for the farm systems right now. Like in the next couple of years, I wouldn't be shocked if they just start to flip the script on some of these teams, and over the gradual years
Yeah.
within the next decade, even they're going to be towards the top because that's just how
Hmm.
the reciprocity. I don't even know if I said that right. Whatever. But so yeah, Jonathan VR, huge. 1 year, $8.2 million. Doesn't break the bank for the Marlins. And now the interesting part here is Jesus Aguilar, another guy acquired. He didn't. He got claimed off of waivers though by the Rays. So he this is a guy, he did not have a good year last year. We know he's a perennial All Star in 2018. And after the year he had last year, he tried to argue an arbitration. He requested 2.575 mil to counteroffer the Marlins 2.325 mil. And for me, I don't understand. You're making millions of dollars. Why is a couple $100,000 just gonna like just not be good enough for you? I just don't understand that.
Well, let me
Especially
counter with this.
okay,
If I'm the Marlins and I'm worth $1 billion, why can't I just give a guy another 200,000? You know.
okay. It goes hand in hand, I guess. But still, it's just I don't know.
I don't know. I don't blame Aguilar. Why not try to get as much money as you can? You know,
I guess, but
like why not ask? I mean, obviously you're going to go to arbitration, and obviously the worst that happens is they rule with the other guy, but or with the team and not with you. But why not ask for the money? You know?
respect. But yeah, I mean, 2019 though was just such a bad year for him. He had 236, not good at all. 714 OPS, just way below average. It's just crazy when you look back at the year just before. Hit 274, 891 OPS,
Hmm.
and because even 2017, 265, 2015, not a good sample size, only 19 at bats, but I mean, hit 316. It's just, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. It's low risk, high reward once again, and he's going to play every day at first base, most
Oh yeah, for
likely. I mean,
sure.
he'll probably, um, there's guys, I mean, Brian Anderson, who could play first base, Jonathan Villar could play first base, so they have some flexibility. Um, Probably the biggest one, though, by far, and I think you can agree with this, Corey Dickerson. Probably one of the most underrated players, or I should say, undervalued players. He's a very good player, but he's very undervalued. What do you think about this?
I love this deal for the Marlins. 2 years, 17.5 million. Again, I mean that's not breaking the bank, especially for a guy. Now he was injured last year, so the numbers are definitely in a small sample size. But 304, 341, 565 slash line, 12 home runs. It's a guy that can definitely swing it. I'm glad to see him out of the NL Central because every time he comes to Great American Ballpark, he just absolutely torches the Reds.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and it's interesting to note, his big lefty bat, and they're moving the right and center field fences in Marlins Park. So it's going to become a bit more hitter
yeah,
friendly for a guy that's already swinging the stick well. I
yeah.
mean, this is another guy, and you can say the same thing for Aguilar, that you know, if they put it together, and this is kind of what I really love about what the Marlins did this offseason, is they went out and they paid some money and they got some guys that could have bounce back years, and suddenly they can flip those players and get prospects and be ready to push forward their rebuild. Because a
Hmm.
thing that they're kind of dealing with right now is that they've got a bunch of prospects, but all their guys are boomer bust guys. So there's a high probability that those guys just flame out or they get to a higher level, they just can't hit anymore. So I think that maybe you can, if they get rid of these guys, if they perform well, then you can start to push forward that rebuild, get some guys with a higher probability of succeeding in the major leagues. And not at the very least, you're getting some name recognition, get some people to come to the ballpark. I'm a lot more willing to go see Jonathan VR play than Miguel Rojas. I mean, that's nothing
Yeah,
against Miguel Rojas. He'll probably get a
yeah,
lot of playing time for the Marlins this year, but I just think VR is a better player. I'd rather go see him play.
yeah. No, I'm right there with you, but it's just funny with Corey Dickerson. This is a guy. He's now in his fifth team since 2013. He's constantly been flipped for those teams. He went from Colorado to Tampa Bay to Pittsburgh, and then Pittsburgh to Philly when they made a playoff push. It's just now he has 2 years with the Miami Marlins, and you know the biggest issue when you sign a lot of guys, and I'll say this about the Reds too, when it comes time, the team chemistry still has to be there, and so we know how hard Miami has struggled since the Jose Fernandez death. Since Jose Fernandez passed away, Yelich got shipped, Realmuto shipped, Ozuna shipped, Stanton shipped. If you just think about that team, if they still had all those players, the perennial
Mhm.
all stars,
Yeah.
you're talking MVPs, Cy Young winners, like on a team like Marlins. You never know, and that's the thing. It's like they're starting to go back to that, and they're gonna build back up, and it's just they have the right pieces. It's just a matter of time of how quickly they're gonna put the pieces together for the puzzle.
Right. A few other quick guys I want to note. I know they're not on our official rundown, but some
Yeah,
guys that I think are worth at least mentioning. They got Brandon Kinsler on a 1 year deal with a team option as well. 57 innings last year, 2.68 ERA, and a 1.02 out of the whip, or
that's
1.02 whip with out of the pen.
yeah.
Uh, a 48 to 13 strikeout to walk ratio. I mean, obviously, this gives them some stability in their bullpen, but I mean, like I said
Mhm.
before, this is another guy that they can flip. Same thing with Matt Joyce, 238 plate appearances last year, OPS of 858. I mean, I just think that they went out and then they got a lot of guys that can really help them this year.
Mhm.
Um, Minor league deals, they got Matt Kemp, Ryan LaVarnway, and Pat Vendetti.
You mean
I hope Pat
Matt
Vendetti.
Joyce, not Matt Kemp, Matt Joyce.
No, they got Matt Kemp on a minor league deal as
Did they
well.
really?
They did, yeah. So personally, I really hope
Wow.
that Pat Vendetti makes the roster, just because I think the whole switch-handedness
Oh,
thing is
dude,
fun.
that was awesome when he was with Oakland.
It's
It was
such a
so
cool
cool.
like just yeah.
Hmm.
Ryan LaVarnway, he'll probably catch on with the team as a catcher, just because it's always good to have catching depth. I mean, he's got
Yeah.
the best single game catcher performance in Reds history, which is pretty crazy considering that Johnny Bench was a Red for what 20 years. So part of my heart goes out to him. And the only reason I bring up Matt Kemp is for last year, I briefly did a podcast called Baseline to Baseline, and I went on the record on that podcast and said that Michael Lorenzen would hit more home runs than Matt Kemp as a Red. I was wrong because they both hit one. So I'm putting it out there again. I believe this year that for the second year in a row that Michael Lorenzen will hit the same amount or more home runs than Matt Kemp this year in the major leagues. So
Safe
I'm
to
just going to
say.
make that bold prediction now, and we'll see if it pays off. But
Hey, that's
I
safe
just
to
figured I'd
say.
throw that out there.
That's safe to say. They also signed Sean Rodriguez just recently, 3 days ago, to a minor league contract. Also, extend or invitation to spring
Yeah, I
training.
mean, good
So
utility guy.
defensively,
I
at
don't know.
least, yeah,
Yeah, at
he
least
could come in.
defensively. Last
Yeah.
guy, and I was surprised he was available, was Sterling Sharp. I don't know if you know anything about this guy or not, but he's a prospect in the Nationals organization. Really good pitch mix. He's got a nasty sinker, throws hard, gets a good breaking stuff. I was surprised that the Nationals left him available.
Hmm.
He's a guy he's been a starter in the minors. I would say probably this year with the Marlins, he's going to be a reliever just because you kind of got to hire a Rule 5 guy that's not necessarily ready for the major leagues yet in the bullpen. But
Yeah.
this is a guy that going forward, I mean, he could throw 4 or 5 pitches in his mix, and he could be a part of their rotation for years to come if he really puts it all together. So I would say that's probably going to be another guy to watch this year with his team.
Yeah. I mean, and with Jordan Yamamoto as well, Sandy Alcantara, Pablo Lopez, they have a very young rotation. Like it is on the up and coming. I'm telling you right now. And then also Sixto Sanchez, who was part of that big deal with JT Realmuto
Right, with
last
JT
year.
Realmuto, yeah.
That's another guy. He's probably going to make his debut this year. They're going to be very good. They did lose Sterling Castro though. That is mentioned as one of the subtractions. Went to the Nationals. He had a pretty decent year though. Had a pretty decent year, batting average wise, at least 270. So
I don't know.
I mean,
Any player that's on base percentage is only what, like 30 points higher than their batting
they
average.
just
To
don't
me, that's
walk.
a huge concern
Yeah,
because your play discipline's just
awful.
horrible.
Yeah,
But I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a huge loss for them, especially since you got VR that kind of takes that role away from Castro. I definitely think that's an upgrade if you look at those two. So
yeah, no, absolutely. I could not agree more. You look also Curtis Granderson retired, but now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the Marlins' potential lineup for opening day. So we got Jorge Alfaro catching, Jesus Aguilar at first base, Isan Diaz, the young second baseman, uh, slated there. Jonathan VR at third base, like we mentioned, he could play
mhm.
possibly anywhere. Miguel Rojas at short, and honestly, this outfield isn't too bad except for Lewis Brinson, Corey Dickerson, and Brian Anderson. Brian Anderson is a guy too, very undervalued. This is a guy who also he hit 261 last year. Let me take you over here. He hit 261 last year. Had an 810 OPS. He's a very consistent player. You look at his first 3 years in the league. Hitting a career of 267. This is an OBP of 349. That's something you just can't ask for much more when you're talking about the Miami Marlins. You just yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love Brian Anderson personally. All-star caliber player, can play both the corner infield and corner outfield spots. I don't know. I mean, I almost feel bad for him because he's just a head above
He also
everybody
played
else
third
that's
base too.
there. Yeah, and I mean, and that's a lot another thing. When you look at their lineup, there's a lot of position versatility. I mean, Isan Diaz could
Yeah.
play second and third base, maybe a little
Yep.
shortstop.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan VR could play anywhere in the infield. Miguel Rojas, same thing, anywhere in the infield. Then you have Brian Anderson, who's we have slated as an outfield spot, but could be an infield spot, and it's you got guys all over the place. Not to mention, I mean, Matt Joyce and Harold Ramirez. I mean, I don't know how confident I am in Luis Brinson.
Not
I
at
mean, he's
all.
a guy that's definitely struggled with swing and miss stuff. I don't know. I would say this is probably his last chance to put something together. If he doesn't do it here, I would say he's probably out of luck and maybe just
Oh,
he'll probably have to find another place to play because I don't know. He just hasn't really been able to put it together at the major league level yet, which sucks because he was pretty much one of the main pieces in the Yelich deal, I believe. And so I don't know, man, the Marlins really fumbled the bag on those trades, didn't they?
no, they really did, and I'll tell you right now, he's going to be on a quick come up if he doesn't figure it out within the 14 days because the Miami Marlins have a lot of depth in the minor leagues. JJ Baudet, who was an absolute stud at Vanderbilt, drafted in the first round last year. He's 22 years old. He can make a very early major league debut. Not a lot to lose for the Miami Marlins. You could wait 14 days or whatever, but Luis Brinson just it's like it's just a band-aid, right? Just a band-aid. You just
Yep.
you try to rip off, but it's a slow rip and it's very painful. This is a guy who he hasn't even hit past the Mendoza line the past 2 years. Uh, it's supposed to be a huge
Yeah.
prospect. Just
I'd be surprised
sucks.
if JJ Bleday makes his debut at least early in the season. Maybe it's the guy that you see with September call-ups,
Yeah.
which is a whole other thing because now that's cut down to 28 roster sizes. So you're not going to see as many call-ups from here on out. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I would be more surprised if a guy like Matt Joyce or Harold Ramirez didn't step in and take his spot in the outfield before. I mean, Joyce, you got a guy who's a veteran presence, been there in the past. Harold Ramirez is a bit younger. I think he's like 25 or 26, but he's got a good chance to step in and produce at the major league level.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And the one guy I want to mention too, that he was on the he had a UCL injury last year. He was on the 60-day DL, or I'm sorry, I injured reserve, or is it
IL injured
IL?
list.
Gosh, it's always a DL to me. I still can't.
I know,
It's
same.
Jose Urena. So he moved from a starting pitcher to the closer later in the year, and now it was just announced that he is going to try to earn a starting spot in spring training. So either way, he's going to be on the roster. We just don't know yet if he is going to be with the starters or bullpen. But let's go ahead and move on now to our next team. Next team we have are the New York Mets, baby. The New York Mets. This is a team. They really only made one really good acquisition, I feel like, and that was Dome Betances. But they did sign some other players. If you want to go ahead with that.
Yeah, so to hit on Dylan Betances quickly, last year he dealt with a couple of injuries, one of which was an Achilles injury. I don't remember if it was a separate injury or if he just re-aggravated it, but I think he only pitched two-thirds of an inning in 2019. 2014 and
No.
2018, though, 2.22 ERA, 607 punch outs in 373 and a third innings. I mean, before last year, he's definitely consistent, 66 or more games every season. I mean, if he's healthy and they have Dylan Betances and Edwin Diaz out of the back of the bullpen, if Edwin Diaz kind of comes back to where he was, that's kind of be a really scary eighth and ninth inning to have to deal with every night.
Yeah, Dome Betances is an absolute stud. Yeah, you can't even put a sample size on that one game. But 2018, from 2018 literally to 2014, just godly numbers: 2.36 career ERA, 1.04 WHIP career. Definitely huge, especially. Do they still have Juris Familia, by the way?
I believe so, yeah. So, I mean, they've got a chance to have a really good bullpen. Um, yeah, so, I mean, as far as the rest of
Yeah, they do.
their
Yeah.
offseason acquirees, Rick Porcello, Michael Waka, the former Cardinal, Jake Marisnik, and they got Steven Gonzalez off waivers. I guess we'll start with him, former top 100 prospect. Had some elbow problems last year. He's a guy that if he realizes potential, he could definitely be like he's got probably at this point in his career maybe just like a third man in the rotation type potential. But I mean,
Yeah.
even that, if you can get that out of a waiver claim, then I think you take it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially with the problems
Porcello,
Syndergaard has had too in the past
right,
couple of
right.
years.
Yeah, Porcello and Waka are two guys to me I wouldn't expect that much out of. I mean, both of them really struggled last year. Rick Porcello with a 5.5 ERA and 174 innings is not
Mm-hmm.
exactly a great look. Michael Waka had a little bit better ERA at 4.76, but his WHIP was over 1.5. So
That's bad.
I don't know. I mean, but the back of the Mets rotation is pretty wide open. Once you get past DeGrom, Syndergaard, and Marcus Stroman, who they got via trade from the Blue Jays, it's pretty wide open. I would say Steven Matz is probably your guy that's at 4, but
Yeah,
for that 5 spot, I mean, you're probably
it's
looking
open.
at Michael Wacha and Rick Porcello competing, and then whoever doesn't get it probably is going to get relegated to the bullpen. I would say is probably how that shakes out.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you right now, though, the Mets, this is my opinion, I think the Mets have the best bullpen going towards opening day. Seth Lugo, absolute stellar season last year. He was actually ranked the fifth best relief pitcher on the Shredder on MLB Network that I just saw yesterday. A very solid reliever. Him, and if Edwin Diaz can go back to his ways in 2018 when he was with the Mariners, I mean,
Hmm.
this is a very dangerous bullpen. If you can just get your starter to go to the sixth inning, you just never know in this division. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out for the Mets. But
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think like the Zach Wheeler thing or losing Zach Wheeler, I think is definitely going to hurt. But I mean, the front if Syndergaard shows up and he's healthy and Stroman pitches the way that he can pitch,
mhm,
then I mean, you've got 3 guys at the top of your rotation, 2 of which could be Cy Young candidates, the other one an All-Star, and if he overachieves, you could even see Stroman in the conversation for a Cy Young. Like, there's definitely
yeah,
like the potential there at the front of the rotation. It's just going to have to can the front of that rotation and the bullpen carry along those last 2 spots in the rotation because that's where they're really going to be hurting.
yeah, those last two spots, especially in a tough NL East division with a lot of sluggers. You're absolutely right. And what really hurts is them losing Zach Wheeler. But we'll talk about him with the next team we'll talk about, which will be the Phillies. But let's go ahead and pull up the Mets' potential opening day lineup. We got Wilson Ramos behind the dish, Pete Alonso, Rookie of the Year and MLB home run leader at first base. Robinson Cano, see if he can re-solidify his career in the late stages. Second, Jeff McNeil, we mentioned him earlier at third. Ahmed Rosario at short, and the outfield kind of looking slim. I don't really know how I feel about their outfield. You got Michael Conforto, Brandon Nimmo, Jake Marisnik, and then Jonas Cespedes. That's the real question mark for the Mets, isn't it?
Hmm. Yeah, I think if Cespedes is healthy and can produce at the major league level, then this lineup starts to look a lot better than what it does right now. I mean, Conforto and Nimmo are definitely guys. They've got the potential. They could put it together. Pete Alonso came on super strong last year. So, you hope his production stays and he doesn't have kind of like a sophomore year slump.
Yeah.
I would say the one thing you could probably bet on the best in this lineup would be Jeff McNeil, and that's that he's
Mm-hmm.
probably going to get on base. Uh, he's a guy that can play first, second, third, left, and right field. So that kind of gives them some versatility.
True
And
utility
then you could
player.
slot in a guy like JD Davis into third base, and that kind of gives you some help into your outfield. But I mean, all in all, like it's if everyone produces, it could be a good lineup.
Yeah. So very, very questionable though to see, like you said, Jeff McNeil solidified. Utility player could do it all. It'll be interesting to see, and especially with Wilson Ramos. We know stolen bases are not that much of a thing anymore in Major League Baseball as it was 10 years ago. Wilson Ramos does not have that great of an arm, but he still does have a good bat. He still does have a
Mhm.
good bat for his age. But let's go ahead and move on. Do you have anything else you want to say regarding the Mets?
No, I think we've about covered it. So
All right, well, let's
let's
move
move on to
on.
the Phillies.
Let's move on. If you're listening, you're gonna love this because it's your Philadelphia Phillies. My dad's a huge Philadelphia Phillies fan. Grew up in Philadelphia. Dad's side did, and key additions right away. Zach Wheeler. Just obviously that's huge that you can get 5 years out of him. You can't go wrong. 118 mil. This is a pretty good contract for the righty.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is that it was definitely an area in need for the Phillies. I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at their rotation, I mean, obviously you've got Aaron Nola at the front, and he's definitely a star pitcher. But outside of that, there's not much there. I mean, Jake Arrieta, you don't really know what you're going to get. When he was with the Cubs, he was great, and before
Yeah.
that he was great. But this last season was a pretty subpar. And then I know the way that we have it kind of projected out with the rest of the rotation, you're probably looking at Vince Velasquez and Zach Eflin, and those aren't really guys that you're going to expect much out of either. So I think that this is huge for them, not only because Zach Wheeler himself is just a great player, and anytime you can add great players, that's what you want to do. But it's probably in the place that they needed help the most.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see the 3-4-5 for the Phillies is going to play out that, or the way it's going to play out we just don't know. I think they're going to be able to pick it up because they do have such a strong offensive load,
Hmm.
but I think they definitely have probably the weakest rotation like pitching depth. They do have some stuff,
Right.
they have Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler, but it's just going to be interesting to see. But
Yeah.
you move on to the offensive side of things. You got Didi Gregorius 1 year. You mentioned that he's a bounce back candidate from Tommy John. Talk about your boy Didi Gregorius because I know he's a former Red. I know you love him.
Yes, he is another former Red. I don't know. I mean, this is a guy that I was hoping that the Reds would go after this offseason. Obviously, I mean, I'm sure that they did. Obviously, they didn't win him. 1 year, 14 million is probably around what I expected for DD. I thought maybe he'd get a couple million more, but 2018 was really solid for him. 268 average, 335 on base, and a 494 slugging. Especially have a shortstop is huge. Then you got the Tommy John 2019. He came back towards the end of the season, played the second half of the season, 82 games, but 238 average, 276 on base percentage. That's just not that. I mean, that's pretty bad production out of your shortstop. So I don't know. I mean, it's a good pickup for them, but you just kind of got to hope that he's bouncing back.
Yeah, I think he will bounce back. He's put up very good numbers in 2018, 2017, and 2016. 2018 was his best year by far with 829 OPS, and that was with the Yankees. Really, really, really just solidified him as one of the best shortstops in the game. And people think he's a lot older than he actually is. He's only 29 years old. So um, definitely good, especially with the guy right next to him and Gene Segura. Gene Segura, he can just move right over to second. It's not that big of an issue for him, and it's going to be
Yeah, I
pretty.
mean, the one thing that's going to suck for the Phillies is that their defense up the middle is not going to be good. I think if you look at the outs above average, which is a fielding stat that came out like a month ago, I think.
Yeah,
Didi Gregorius was like towards the very bottom of that list in terms of abilities defensively as a shortstop. So I mean, it's just kind of one of those things where you gotta hope he bounces back. The good thing is that it's a 1 year deal, so if he doesn't, you're not on the hook long term for money.
yeah.
But for Didi's case, I hope he does kind of pull out of it.
I think he will, and I see what you're saying. He's not he doesn't have great mobility at shortstop, but Gene Segura is pretty good defensively, and at second base too, it'll be easier for him. I feel like
Yeah.
because you don't get as many hard hit balls at second base as you do short and like the tougher plays. But I don't know. But they did lose Maikel Franco to the Royals, but they just fell right in with Scott Kingery. So
Right.
that is, yeah. What do you say
Yeah.
about
I
that?
mean, they definitely lost. I mean, we talked about Corey Dickerson earlier and how much we loved him. That's another guy that they lost
Yep,
this offseason.
yep.
They also lost Cesar Hernandez, who was
That
the
was a
guy that
huge,
was the
huge loss.
right. Yeah, he went to the
Yeah,
Indians, but I mean, 279 batting average, 333 OBP, something to be as you're leaving something to be desired on the table there. But
yeah,
408 slugging, I mean, not exactly going to kill you with the power, but it's a guy that he'll hit for average and he'll play pretty solid defense up the middle. So
yeah,
I mean, I think given losing Cesar Hernandez, I think that Didi Gregorius is a good enough replacement candidate for that. And I mean, I think that the rest of their lineup, I'm sure we'll preview it here in a second. But you look at guys like Hoskins and Harper and McCutcheon, you've got bats in there that can really produce.
yeah. And you talk about Hoskins too. Let's go ahead and move on to the lineup because I want to talk about Reese Hoskins for a brief moment. Reese Hoskins had a pretty down year last year, but in 2018, this is a guy just breakout rookie. He moved to first base this past year, and maybe that was kind of a thing for him, just kind of adjusting and whatnot. But you look at this lineup, top to bottom, very very solid. You got JT Realmuto behind the dish, probably the best catcher in the game. You could put him up there with Yasmani Grandal and other Buster Posey still, Yadier Molina. You got Reese Hoskins at first, Gene Segura at second, Scott Kingery, another guy who kind of played various positions, had a very good year last year with the Phillies. D-Day Gregorius at short, Andrew McCutcheon comeback. We'll see how that goes as well. We talked about D-Day Gregorius. See how McCutcheon comes back as well. Bryce Harper had a very good year for his first year in Philadelphia, which was surprising. And Adam Hazley slated to be the starting center fielder for the Philadelphia Phillies. This is a guy who's a top prospect, and they're projecting him to have a very, very good year, about 275, 280. So, your thoughts on this lineup, Noah Gayhart?
It's going to be boom or bust, honestly. If you kind of look at it, like I mean, real until you know what you're going to get. Hoskins, great 2018, horrible 2019.
Yeah.
You hope maybe he can at least kind of figure out somewhere in the middle. Segura and Kingery, both guys are going to hit for average. We already covered Didi Gregorius. Uh, McCutcheon and Harper. I think that those are guys you're definitely going to hope that. I mean, Harper's going to produce. There's probably no doubt about that. McCutcheon, you don't really know. It's kind of a question mark.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Hazley, I mean, former top prospect, but I mean, it just depends how they're going to adjust to the major leagues. With the full season. I mean, they do have Jay Bruce and Nick Williams kind of as outfield depth. I think that those are probably some of the better, at least in this division, in terms of like depth guys to have. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think overall, I would imagine they're probably going to produce pretty well, but there's just a lot of question marks with this team.
Question marks, but I just think their offensive unit is just going to be too much for some teams in the NL East and teams that they're going to be playing across the National League. So it'd be interesting to see what our thoughts towards the end of the podcast, but we'll go ahead and bring you back here to us, and we'll move on now to the Washington Nationals, your reigning 2019 World Series champions. Thank goodness they beat the Houston Astros. Not going to talk about them, but gotta love it. What do you think about the Nationals coming into 2020?
I mean, to be blunt, I don't think they're going to repeat as World Series champions.
I don't either.
Uh, you know, one of the things that was a real weakness for them coming to this offseason was their bullpen. I think we kind of saw that for the most part in the playoffs because they really rode Max Scherzer, Steven Strasburg, and Patrick Corbin for everything they had. They just kind of relied on those three
Yeah.
guys. And Daniel Hudson stepped up a little bit, and that's something that's going to talk about here is that I mean, they got they re-signed him 2 years, 11 million. 73 innings last year, 71 strikeouts, 247 ERA, 114 WHIP. I think that that's kind of going to be huge for them. And then the other signing that they got was Will Harris. How do you feel about him?
That was huge. A huge 2019, 60 innings pitched, 1.5 ERA, 62 strikeouts, 0.93 WHIP. That's you can't ask for anything else but that for a reliever, and they're definitely going to need the help because offensively and their starting pitching, I just don't see them lasting. I think they're going to need that depth in their bullpen. So that was a good signing by them. I actually wish it was more than 3 years personally, but not bad. Not
Yeah, I
bad.
mean, anytime you get, I mean, that's kind of the thing with relievers, though, is you never really know. I mean, you look at, I'll use the Reds as an example. We had Jared Hughes and David Hernandez,
Yeah.
and they were absolutely lights out in the bullpen. And then they come back the next season, and both of them get lit up, and they're both waived within the first couple months. So you never really know. I think Will Harris, I mean, is definitely pretty close to as sure of a bet as you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
3 years, 24. I don't think that's an overpay by any stretch of the imagination.
Mm-mm.
So I don't know. I really like this for them. I think that solidifying the bullpen is a huge thing for them, and maybe that kind of helps them keep afloat in the division. So overall, I really like it.
Yeah. And we talked about Sterling Castro moving away from the Marlins to the Nationals. It's it's not too bad. It'll be. I think he'll just have an average year, but the Nationals are just going
Yeah,
to be so down. I mean, Juan Soto is just going to have to carry that team, and
yeah. I think that the big storyline is losing Anthony Rendon. I
that
mean,
dude,
319
yeah,
average, 412 OBP,
yeah,
598 slugging, 34 home runs, 126 RBIs. I mean, I think any lineup's going to be hurting when you take that away from it, and I mean that's going to be a huge loss for them. And I think I mean, when we go to talk about the lineup, I think you're definitely going to see that they're going to be missing that for sure.
yeah. And you know what? We'll just go ahead and pull that lineup for you right now. It's not looking great. Uh, Kurt Suzuki, he was a World Series clutch hitter. We know that. In retrospect, he's just not that great of a player. It's just fact. He's just not. Eric Thames platooning it with Ryan Zimmerman. Ryan Zimmerman, not the player he was, but they're gonna bring him back. He's gonna retire as a national. That's objective. And Eric Thames, he had a good year. What 2, 3 years ago, something like that, and he's just kind of just been there, like hovering around below average first baseman. Howie Kendrick, that's honestly your second best player right now that I'm looking at in this lineup, and he's what 37, 38 years old, something like that. He was the oldest player to win what was it, National League Championship Series MVP or something like that. Um,
Yeah, I think so.
as Dribble Cabrera, your third baseman, that is a huge, huge difference from Anthony Rendon. I mean, my goodness, Trey Turner, that's good. You got that down. Juan Soto in the outfield. Adam Eaton has not been the player he used to be with the White Sox, and then Victor Robles, who is another young and promising player. But your thoughts on the lineup?
I mean, it's bad, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's as bad as you made it out to be reading through it. I like Kirk Suzuki for what he is. I mean, he's not going to guy that's going to get on base a ton, but he's a guy that will hit for average at least decently. He's got some pop, and I mean, I think he gives you everything that you really need out of the catcher position.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Eric Thames and Zimmerman as a platoon. I kind of like that move, honestly. Thames is a guy that historically has crushed righties, and Zimmerman's a guy that's always crushed lefties. I think at first base you can kind of live with their defense, and I think the production will be not too bad out of there. Howie Kendrick's a guy that I really like, despite his age. I mean, obviously he's getting up there, but none of his tools. This is something we talked about a little bit earlier. Is that none of his tools are going to be something that age is really going to regress. He's not a
Yeah,
guy that hits for power. He's not a guy that's stealing a ton of bases. At second base, your defense doesn't really have to be great. And he's just a guy that gets for average. He gets on base, and I think that obviously you want a little more than that, but I don't think Howie Kendrick's going to be a super problem. Uh, third
he's
base,
gonna
and it's a guy
produce.
that yeah, third base, a guy that I don't think you mentioned, but we have Asdrubal Cabrera listed, and a guy that I think is going to step in and play a lot in the infield this year is Carter Kieboom. I think he's a
That's a
guy that
yeah.
former former top prospect. I don't know if he's lost his eligibility yet as far as a prospect goes, but he's a guy that can play second, third, short. Probably going to leave. He's not going to be a great defender at shortstop, but I think with the bat that he's going to bring to their lineup, that you'll
Yeah.
live with his defense at shortstop. And doing something like that, that gives you the flexibility to move Trey Turner in the outfield if you need it. But I mean, the outfield is definitely kind of where their lineup kind of comes alive. You get Juan Soto, who honestly I think has a chance to be an MVP candidate this year. It's a guy that is going to hit
Yeah.
300 on base percentage, probably going to be around, if not over 400 easily. Guy that could slug around 500. Defense isn't great, but I think if you're getting that kind of production out of him, then it doesn't really matter how bad his defense is in the outfield. I think you'll just live with it. And you know, he's a guy that I've taken a liking to just because he's a guy that really just knows the strike zone well and he just gets on base. Adam
Swag
Eaton
too.
is right. Yeah, definitely. He's a fun player to watch, you know, and that's
Hmm.
part of it. Adam Eaton, probably not exactly a fun player to watch, but he's a guy that's going to hit for average, play pretty good defense for you in the outfield. He's not going to be a problem. And then, you know, the wild card I think for this team is going to be Victor Robles,
Hmm.
guy that was at the top of the defensive metrics as far as center field goes last year. Tons of range, good arm. Will definitely going to help you on the defensive side of the ball. Uh, Probably got to hope that he puts it together a little bit more at the plate this year. I know that there were times where he struggled last year, but
Dude, he has a
you know he's
cannon for
another
an
guy.
arm though. Like, oh my, dude,
Yeah,
his arm is
I mean he's another guy
phenomenal.
that was a top five prospect. You know, so I mean the
Yeah.
potential's there with Juan Soto, Robles, and Keyboom to kind of and a Trey Turner as well to kind of lead this team into their next period of where they're competing. But I don't know. I just don't think this year's the year, especially when you lose as much production as you do with Rendon.
Yeah. No, I don't think so either. I do think they're still going to produce offensively. I just think their pitching is going to be hurting a little bit, and it's just still hard to fill that void, like you mentioned. Um, One thing I think it's kind of funny too. It's gonna be so hard to win the National League MVP, right? I mean, Mookie Betts is now on the Dodgers. You got Cody Bellinger. You have two MVPs in the outfield there. You
Yeah,
got Freddie Freeman, Ronald Acuna. Those are two guys who could win MVP on the Braves. You know, Phillies. I haven't seen it in a hot minute, but you never know what kind of season Harvard could just produce. You just,
right. He could just come out of nowhere and do something crazy.
yeah,
I mean, Pete Alonso, if he puts up a year similar to last year, I mean, he's a guy that could possibly put it together and just be insane for a second year in a row. And I mean, you'd have to at least bring him up in that conversation. So yeah, I mean, outside of maybe probably the Marlins, because I doubt that Brian Anderson's going to be in MVP talks. But outside of them, I'd say everyone has at least one, maybe two possible MVP candidates in this division alone.
that's insane. And we haven't even touched the NL Central or the NL West. I mean, the NL East is it's a strong division. It really
It's
is.
going to be a bloodbath for sure.
It's going to be a bloodbath. You know, this is a good transition period to go ahead and go with our projections. So first, we're going to go with Noah. Noah, go ahead and explain your reasonings why you have the Atlanta Braves as your number one.
Yeah, so I've got the Atlanta Braves 1, Phillies 2, Nationals 3, Mets 4, Marlins in last place. So sorry if there are any Marlins fans, but it's just not your year. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, I mean, you could see like these top four teams are grouped pretty close together. I mean, I went a bit more conservative with the Braves winning the division 90 games, but I think what it boils down to is that all of these teams are just going to beat up on each other the whole year. Like, I don't
Yeah,
think none of these teams are good enough on their own to just really separate themselves from the pack. And so, yeah, I have Braves 1, Phillies 2, and through the rest of the list. But like, you take those top four teams, and if one of them just happens to get a little more lucky than the other three, then suddenly you can mix those four teams any way you really want to.
that was kind of the same
Uh,
talks last year
yeah,
too.
right. Yeah, I mean, a lot all these teams you just kind of they all seem to have like one weakness, and that's just kind of what's holding them back. I mean, with the
Yeah,
Braves you don't really know what you're going to get out of the bullpen. The Phillies, you're kind of looking at the back of their rotation. You don't really know outside of Nola and Wheeler what you're going to get there, and then there's question marks with the offense. I'll go ahead and get the Marlins out of the way. They just don't have the talent that it's going to take to compete this year. The Mets, the offense are a question, and you kind of got to wonder about the last spot in their rotation. And then you can kind of say we talked about it enough with the Nationals, but losing Rendon, there's probably just not enough production in that lineup and then the back of their rotation to kind of carry them to run away with the division. So I don't know. It'll be an interesting division to watch because there's just a lot of parity in it this year. You don't really know what's going to happen.
hmm
So how do you have it shaken out?
so. For me, we basically have the same standings, but I actually have the Philadelphia Phillies winning the division. I think now with a year under their belt with Harper, all these guys, McCutcheon, even though McCutcheon didn't play, there's still team chemistry, right? That you have to work on and
Mhm.
whatnot. I think that's definitely going to be there, especially with D-Day Gregorius coming to the team. That's He's a team player, and when you add Zach Wheeler to your rotation, 31 games starting, 11-8 record, 1.26 WHIP. He pitches to contact. Citizens Bank Park, not necessarily a hitter friendly park, but also not a pitcher friendly park. So it's kind of in the middle.
Mhm.
Um, I just think the only thing they have to worry about is their 3-4-5. They need to see the Jake Arrieta from the Cubs come out to play this year because
Right.
he needs to live up to that contract. One thing I forgot to ask you though, actually, how many of those teams make the playoffs? Let's go back to yours real quick because you mentioned so you got the Braves winning the division. Do you have the Phillies getting a wild card, or both Phillies and Washington, or what?
I would say I would think I haven't done the projections for our Central and West yet,
Right.
but thinking off the top of my head, obviously the Braves make it because I have them winning the division. I would say most likely the Phillies are probably going to get a wild card spot, and then I would say, thinking off the top of my head, I would say that the Central is going to get the other wild card spot. I would say that, but yeah, I think that the Braves and the Phillies. I think the Nationals probably just missed. They'll miss the second wild card by like a game or two. It's definitely going to come down to
To
the
the
end of the
wire.
season.
Oh,
Right, but yeah, I would say the Braves and probably the Phillies are the two teams that make it in.
yeah. And if we go back to mine, I definitely have the Braves getting that first wild card spot, and the second one's going to be out of the NL Central as well because the NL West is just not that strong, not what it used to be. But going back to what I have for my projections, the Atlanta Braves are just they're just too much, and the reason why I have them and the Phillies so close, it's just nitpick. It's going to come down to the last 2 or 3 games. It
Yeah,
really is. The Nationals, the one team that really was hard to project were the Mets because you look at their lineup offensively, they're really good, and their pitching core it's just really good, but they've just really just never seemed to produce for me.
yeah. Frankly,
So
they're the Mets. Every year I feel
yeah,
like we're like, this could be the year where they put it together and they do it. I mean, we talked about it last year. That was what everyone was talking about. This could be the year the Mets do something,
yeah.
and then they didn't. They played awful to start the year. So you never really know, but. I don't know. Until the Mets prove to me that they can do it, I'm not sure that I believe they can.
No, I completely understand. But those are our projections for the NL East. And so now what we're gonna do, this is a special segment that we are going to be doing every Sunday. So it's called Start One, Cut One, Bench One. So what happens is we work our way around the diamond. So so I would give Noah 3 players in a respective position. Noah would give me 3 players in a respective position, and we have to choose one to start, choose one to cut, choose one to bench, and we have to say why. We can't just say so and so. So for me, I had to give Noah 3 catchers, and he had to give me 3 third basemen. So next week we'll do shortstop and second base. So Noah, your start one, cut one, bench one. Your three. Okay.
All right.
First catcher, JT Realmuto. Second one, Wilson Contreras.
All right.
And your third one is Yasmani Grandal. So
Mm.
start one, cut one, bench one, and tell me why.
It's tough. There's four catchers at the top of the league that I think are head and shoulders above everybody else, and you've just given me three of them, which is what makes it so hard.
Exactly.
The
Yeah.
one not mentioned probably being Mitch Garver, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I think for me, Wilson Contreras is probably the clear cut guy. Uh, I think he's a great player, but when you look at what JT Romito and Yasmani Grandal bring, they bring a lot more to the table than what Contreras does. And there are times where Contreras just I don't know if he's consistent enough for me yet to consider him to be a top two guy.
Yeah.
Realmuto in his own right, he's a guy that you know what you're gonna get. Come out probably hit around 270, play solid defense, and another thing is that he brings some speed to the table, which is something that Yasmani Grandal doesn't have. But what Yasmani Grandal has that JT Romito doesn't have is switch hitting ability and the fact that he can
Yeah.
hit the ball a lot harder. And he hits a lot more home runs.
Yeah.
I think for me,
It's give and take.
I'm gonna Yeah. I think I'm gonna bench JT Romito and start Yasmani Grandal. I think the difference for me is how good defensively Grandal is and how much of a reputation he carries for his ability to frame pitches and how much that helps out pitchers. Especially, and I don't think that this is something we have to consider the teams they're on, but I'll just mention it and we'll get into it a few weeks from now when we talk about the AL Central. But Grandal's so valuable, especially to the White Sox, because they've got that young pitching staff. And so, when you bring in a guy that can frame pitches the way he does, play good defense, and call a good game, I just think that that's pretty invaluable. So I think so start Grandal, bench Real Muto, and cut Contreras.
Okay, I like it. I actually agree with you. I actually agree with you. So, um, and your reasons were perfect. So, good job.
Yeah. So for you, I have three third basemen.
Okay.
I decided to not go with the top tier of third baseman.
Okay.
When I looked at this, I was looking at actually at the shredder for third baseman, which is a thing that MLB Network does. If you're not familiar with it, to those
Right.
listening, but so I kind of picked from the back half of that list, and so your three third basemen are a guy we just talked about, third baseman Jeff McNeil,
Okay.
uh, a guy from the White Sox, Yoan Moncada, and the third baseman for the Los Angeles Dodgers, Justin Turner.
Okay. I'm immediately cutting Justin Turner. He's been dealing with
Really?
injury. Yeah, he's been dealing with injury issues past couple years. He's a great player. He's had a great career, and I still think he will have a good career. But McNeil is so valuable. He doesn't hit for power. We know that his slugging percentage is down. Lots of singles. Every now and then he'll get a double and whatnot. But the guy, he makes contact, and this is a guy who can play multiple positions in the infield. You can dabble him out there in the outfield if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have him on my bench because he could come in at any point of the game. He could play anywhere if I had an injury or if I want to do a double switch. And then I'm starting my boy Yohan Moncada. Raw power, raw talent. This guy can do it all. You said he's in the lower tier of third baseman. Give him a year or
Mm-hmm.
two, and he'll be in the top five. I guarantee it. This player is just unbelievable, and especially with that dangerous lineup all of a sudden this offseason, the White Sox. I think he's gonna blossom, and it's going to be dangerous. So I start Yohan Moncada. I bench Jeff McNeil, and I cut Justin Turner.
Yeah, I mean, I would reluctantly cut Justin Turner. I mean, if you look at and it's I honestly before looked into this, I didn't realize he was still producing at the level he is. I mean, if you look at last season, 290 batting average, 27 home runs, 3.7 B WAR, 370 or I'm sorry, that's projected. 372 OBP, 509 slugging. I mean, he's getting up there in age. He's going to be
Mm-hmm.
35 or 36 next season, but I mean, that's still a guy that's producing. And so, I don't
Yeah,
know. I mean, I think I personally would have started Jeff McNeil and benched Yohan Moncada. I mean, Moncada last year, I mean, he went nuts. I mean, there's no way around it. 4.6 WAR, but but I don't know. I mean, but if you look at the season before that, 235 batting average, 315 on base, 400 slugging. So it's kind of like which Yohan Moncada is going to show up.
that's why
And
that's
so,
that's why I kind of did it with the now and just how young he is too and stuff. So I see where you're coming from though.
mm,
Mm-hmm. but yeah, so that was our start one, cut one, bench one segment. Um, if you want to, if you are listening, you can actually email in. I think this would be kind of a cool idea. So we're doing shortstops and second baseman next week. If you want to, you can contact us at chalktalknation@gmail.com. Yet again, that's chalktalknation@gmail.com. You can give us some shortstops. You can give us some second basemen. They have to be current players, though. They have to be current players, though. So I don't want to see a Felipe Lopez or Derek Jeter or something like that. But it's something we'll do every week, just something kind of cool, kind of see what the other person is thinking. Next week, Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, we're going to be doing the AL East preview. So today was the NL East, next week is AL East, and then the following week is NL Central, AL Central, NL West, AL West. We just go in that order. We're going to be talking about more trades, signings, and we'll be able to talk about spring training, maybe a little bit, the outlook, what to expect, some key guys. We talked about guys with some minor league deals that will have a chance to make a ball club. There's definitely guys out there in the AL East that have the same potential to make a big league club. One thing I want to ask you all to do, go ahead, thumbs up the video if you liked it. Also, subscribe to the channel. It's not just going to be podcasts. We'll do vlogs, other baseball content videos you'll see, and just share it across with your friends and whatnot. It really mean a lot to us. We are launching our website, as you've been seeing. I know it's kind of annoying, but it's been scrolling across the entire podcast. Our website, it's awesome, and we're going to be posting blogs on there, vlogs, our podcast. Everything will be on there. A little bit about me, a little bit about Noah. chalktalknation.com. Launches February 11th, 2020. Be sure to follow us at chalktalknation, at Noah_Gayhart, at Rob_Rundle, and we will see you all next week.